Good evening to all ministers, MPs and community leaders. A couple of weeks ago, the ASIO Director General, Mike Burgess, in his annual threat assessment, painted this concerning picture. Many of the foundations that have underpinned Australia's security, prosperity and democracy are being tested. Social cohesion is eroding, trust in institutions is declining, intolerance is growing, even truth itself is being undermined by conspiracy, mis and disinformation. I agree with him, and tonight I want to talk about what human rights has to say and do about some of these big issues. We are, of course, meeting on Aboriginal land. I acknowledge Wurundjeri elders and ancestors and their ongoing connection to culture and country. I acknowledge their Kulin neighbours and all First Nations people present. And it was great to see Ruben Berg, the co-chair of the First Peoples Assembly. As Sarah said, I spent 2 years working at the Yoorrook Justice Commission, the first truth-telling inquiry looking at historical and ongoing injustice against First Peoples in Victoria. It was a privilege for me as a non-Aboriginal person to do this work. It profoundly changed me and the way I look at the world. It was like putting on a different pair of glasses. The truth-telling work Yoorrook is doing alongside the treaty work of the elected First Peoples Assembly is changing Victoria for the better. Victoria is engaging with First Peoples as equals to build a better understanding of our shared history and to negotiate how we together can create a better future in this state that we all call home. A future where First Nations people have control over the issues that affect their lives. A future where First Nations families have access to quality education, housing and healthcare. Where First Nations communities are prosperous and where country is healthy and where culture and language is thriving. The work at Yoorrook also gave me a better understanding of the successes and the failures of the modern human rights movement and the role it has played in the struggle for equality. The modern human rights movement emerged out of the horrors of World War II. The international community came together and said, "Never again." In a remarkable period of innovation between 1945 and 51, a new framework of international law and institutions was established to promote global peace, development and prosperity. The UN Charter, the Nuremberg Trials, the Genocide Convention, the Refugee Convention, and most of all, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Australia was closely involved in the Universal Declaration, and Australian William Hodgson was one of just 9 people on the drafting committee, led by the extraordinary Eleanor Roosevelt. Out of the nadir of mass slaughter and human suffering, these drafters created a document that should rightly be celebrated as one of the pinnacles of human achievement. Australia's Foreign Minister, Doc Evatt, strongly supported the Declaration and was the President of the UN General Assembly when the Declaration was adopted. The Declaration is said to be the most translated document in human history. It lists 30 rights which are essential for all of us to lead a decent, dignified life, no matter who we are or where we are. The right to be safe, to vote, to stand for elections, to peacefully assemble and protest, to an education, to an adequate standard of living, including food, health and housing, and so on. These rights are the key to a good life for all of us, the blueprint for the kind of society that we all want to live in. They reflect values like equality, freedom, dignity, respect, kindness, thinking of others and looking out for each other. In this way, they are similar to the golden rule running through most of the world's religions. Treat others as you would want to be treated yourself. When human rights are respected, our lives are better and our communities are stronger, healthier, safer and more prosperous. How's this relevant today and what's it got to do with rising intolerance? The first article of the UN Declaration proclaims that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. These simple words say to every one of us, you have value, you matter, you deserve dignity because of the mere fact of being human. The words are grounded in our common humanity. Regardless of our differences, we are all human, no us and them. We all bleed the same, we all love, we all suffer, we all experience hope, sadness, wonder and joy. Alongside the human rights treaties that followed it, the Declaration has played a key role in smashing the idea that some humans are worth less than other humans, a corrosive prejudice that gave rise to slavery, colonisation, eugenics, genocide, and more. The words "born free and equal" may seem unremarkable today, and this fact speaks to one of the great successes of human rights. The Declaration and the treaties that followed it sparked huge changes in equality and inclusion for people in communities. Racial equality, religious equality, gender equality, equality for gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans and intersex people. Of course, big challenges remain on all of these fronts. On racism, in Australia, we've made great progress in the last 6 decades, dismantling the White Australia policy, passing the Racial Discrimination Act 50 years ago this year, welcoming millions of migrants from around the world, and building strong and consistent, robust support for multiculturalism. But progress is fragile and it can't be taken for granted. Racism has been rising in recent years. First Nations communities have seen a spike in the volume and hostility of racism during and after the Voice referendum. The systemic nature of racial inequality affecting their families and communities is highlighted by the lack of progress on so many of the closing the gap targets, including child removal and imprisonment. And since 7 October 2023, underlying and persistent prejudice against Muslim, Arab, Palestinian and Jewish communities in Australia has intensified and is having a profound impact on so many. The repeated anti-Semitic arson attacks and the discovery of explosives highlight the gravity of the threats to the Jewish community. And as the Special Envoy Iftar Malik has said, Islamophobia in Australia is endemic, normalised and under-acknowledged. Racism creates stigma, shame and fear. It dehumanises people, makes them shed their culture and identity in public life. It denies people full participation in life and harms people's health and well-being. It corrodes our society and left unchecked, it leads to violence. So how do we respond? Late last year, the Australian Human Rights Commission launched our National Anti-Racism Framework, working closely with the Victorian Human Rights Commission, and Commissioner Roe Allen's here tonight, outlining a comprehensive whole-of-society approach for eliminating racism in Australia. The framework has 63 recommendations ranging from areas like education, law reform, to greater diversity in media and tackling mis and disinformation. We hope that governments, business and civil society get behind the framework. I want to end by going back to the beginning and talking about the erosion of the foundations of Australia's democracy. The values at the heart of Australia's successful liberal democracy are human rights values. Our citizenship booklet, which seeks to define what it is to be Australian, talks about our shared values such as dignity and freedom of everyone, equal opportunity, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of association. These are the values that unite us. Living these values is not about picking which suffering bothers you the most. It's not about selectively applying human rights standards. To address rising intolerance and prejudice and hate, we need leaders like you, the people gathered in this room tonight, to stand together and uphold the commitment to human rights, which is at the heart of the Universal Declaration. Ramadan is a time for reflection, for caring for those less fortunate, and for spiritual renewal. Events like tonight's Iftar and the work of the Australian Intercultural Society show us the way forward, coming together to listen and engage in dialogue so that we can collectively forge a pathway towards peace and respect for each other, grounded in human rights and grounded in our common humanity. Ramadan Mubarak to all. Thank you.